7:37 at the Big 550 KTRS. Paul Harris filling in for McGraw. Kathy Helbig is here to talk real estate advice. Good morning, Kathy.
Good morning.
Yeah, so when we have weather like this, where it's going to be in the mid-90s again today, do you have people calling and saying, get me a house with a pool?
Sometimes, yes. Right now, it's just get me a house. I mean, the market is so crazy still, and the inventory is still low, and we've got buyers just sitting there waiting to pounce on the right house that comes on the market. So pool or no pool, as long as it has air conditioning, we could probably sell it.
Yeah. Who has an un-air-conditioned house in the 21st century?
Well, they're going out. At this temperature, you have people having air conditioning issues and emergency calls like crazy right now. So.
Yeah. All right, so we're going to talk this morning about real estate fees.
We are.
This is how you make your living.
This is how we make our living, and there's also fees for buyers, there's fees for sellers, and a lot of times people are very, very confused about what all of it is and what all is required. So first off, the biggest misconception is, we'll hit it head on, is commission. So when you are selling a home, you are paying the listing agent a commission to sell your home. That's not just to it's not just to sell it to your own buyers. It's really to market it to the masses. And 85% of the time, it's another real estate agent that has the buyer for one of your listings. So the commission has it built in that although you're paying me and my broker, then we have to pay the agent and their broker if they bring the buyer to the house.
So if you're representing the seller, you collect the commission, but you have to pay the person who's representing the buyer out of that commission.
Correct.
And you said 85%, so it's not often that they are both the seller and the buyer with the same agent.
Not near as often as everybody thinks it is. So everybody thinks that we're walking away with this huge chunk of money, the full percentage, and most of the time we are not. We are almost never 100% anyway, because then you have your broker fees. The broker gets a cut of everyone's commission for you holding your license there. And then also there's expenses. I mean, we run a business, so you oftentimes end up with maybe 20% of your cut that is a profitability factor. So a lot of people just don't comprehend that, and they begrudge a commission. And then the breakdown is typically close to 50-50. So let's say, for instance, we pull a 6% commission. Then it's about 45-55% how that splits. So the listing agent typically gets a hair more, and then you offer out, maybe 3% or 2.7% of that to the other side, and that's their compensating factor. So you have to understand, when you are dealing with commissions, what we're offering out there for agents is what is getting them to bring buyers to your house. You have to be really careful about slashing commission rates, because we can't slash it all on our side. We have the expense. So then what happens is you don't even realize it. It's getting slashed on the buyer co-op side. And then that agent isn't as incentivized to sell that house.
So the good news is, if you're a buyer, you don't have to pay the commission. Well,
correct.
Indirectly you do when you buy the house.
Correct.
That
it's
cost is probably built
negotiated into
in.
the whole deal.
Right.
But no, there is not the out-of-pocket cost like selling a house to a buyer. Sometimes there'll be a transaction fee, closing fees, and things like that. That's very minimal. But a buyer is compensated. The buyer's agent is compensated by the listing agent of the homes that you are selling. Now, the buyer's fees come into play on closing costs. And that's another big misconception that people have about closing costs. Sellers are freaked out to offer it or pay it because they think they got to come to the table with that money in hand, which they do not. It comes out of the proceeds. And buyers don't understand what all is included in closing costs. So when you write a contract, you should say the words closing costs, prepaids, and or points. That includes your appraisal, your building inspections, any prepaid fees that you're paying to buy that house. A lot of those things can qualify under that term, so that you're coming to the table with less money if you negotiate that closing cost into the contract. Other things are title insurance, mortgage insurance, that type of thing is what altogether comes up with the buyer's closing cost.
So when a buyer is looking for a house and they figure out what the price is going to be, they have to add in a little bit. What percentage is
Their
on top of
lender
that?
will tell them. It all depends on the loan that they go with. It runs the gamut. But, it can be as much as 6% on some of the loans. But a lot of times it's a few $1,000s by the time you put, depending on which price range house that you're in, your title company fees, you're putting your escrows in, so your taxes, you're escrowing for the year, you're escrowing your hazard insurance. All of that is closing cost. And then Missouri, that is all paid by the buyer. In other states, it's paid by the seller. So the seller gets the commission and the closing costs lumped on them in a lot of other states, but in Missouri, it's not. And then a lot of times, again, you negotiate it into the deal. So if you're paying $350 for a house and you have $5,000 in closing costs, then perhaps you give the seller $355, and then they agree to give you the credit for the $5,000 in closing costs. So then nobody's really coming to the table with that money. It's all coming out of the proceeds at the end.
And also, and this is really more of a mortgage loan officer question than anything else, a lot of that closing cost, that thousands of dollars in closing costs, you can sometimes add that to the mortgage and kind of roll it off and finance
That's exactly
that long
what
term.
you're doing. So if you finance in the closing cost and pay $355 instead of $350, you're in essence borrowing that $5,000 over the course of the loan.
Yeah.
So
there
get a
you
good
go.
real estate agent.
Absolutely.
Essentially what,
There's a lot
that's essentially
to
what
it.
it comes
A lot
down to.
it.
I would recommend Kathy Helbig from the Kathy
Absolutely.
Helbig Group, where you can contact at what number?
314-276-SOLD.
Or KathyHelbiggroup.com.
Right.
Kathy's here every Thursday on McGraw Live in the Morning on the Big 550 KTRS.
This is Monique